Hey guys, this is Jared Flinn with the Bulk Loads podcast. Got Tyler in here with me.
What's going on?
And we had a fun week, I guess last week.
Yeah.
I guess it'd be 2 weeks ago by the time this is live.
Yeah.
But we went up to the Smart Freight office up in Omaha, and we had our annual party and had a good time. What'd you think?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot of laughs. It's always good to kind of meet up with, our other companies up there and really visit. We also got to do some customer visits along the way. We stopped by and saw some of our clients. And speaking of, you stopped by and saw tall grass commodities.
Yeah, actually, Chad, shout out to you. He listens to, or actually was watching the podcast and asked about how he could get his hat on there. This will actually move from my head back to the shelf. But if you want to get a hat, we would love for you to mail us a hat.
Yeah.
And we'll hang it with the rest of them behind here.
Yeah, and you can just do that by sending it to the bulkLoads office, 1340 East Woodhurst Drive, Springfield, Missouri, 65804. We can also drop in the episode notes, or if you just want to email us, podcast@bulkloads.com, we can get you the information there.
Yeah, and just speaking of swag, we still have shirts available, right?
We do.
Summer shirts. I think you've had a lot of people request.
Yeah.
I like the orange better. I think
a lot of people like the orange.
Yeah, I was
a lot of people
last week and had a lot of compliments. So if you want a shirt, what do they need to do, Tyler?
Just email podcast@bulkloads.com. We'll get you one sent out, and we'll get it in your hands.
Any hats left?
We're running very low on the hats.
Okay.
So if you want one, now is the time. Yeah. As soon as you hear this, pull up your email. Same thing, podcast@bulkloads.com. And hopefully there still will be a few left whenever you do that. If not, we'll figure something out.
Limited supply.
Yeah.
Oh, well, cool. Well, today I'm going to bring on John Pocock with Pocock Trucking. These guys, they've been members really since the beginning. I've said that with many of our guests that we've had on, but they've been on, since our inception with Bulk Loads. John has got quite the story. They run almost 30 trucks. They're based out of Idaho. Actually, they're just like West Yellowstone, which I've been in that area.
Yeah.
I'm a little envious. They're in just beautiful God's country is what I told them on the podcast. But John, he is a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
His family, they farm out there, and they have the trucking company, and then now he's kicked off this fertilizer company, which was one reasons that I wanted to have him on. I followed him on LinkedIn with this fertilizer company and wanted him to talk about that, but just talk about their history. I love entrepreneurs. I love business owners in this space, and more just learning about them. I think it fascinates me on how they saw a need or a problem and how they're solving that. So.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was just amazed just listening and watching the episode whenever John was talking about how they were kind of the first ones to run the double grain trains in Washington and Oregon. And it was just fascinating, him talking about that, how they got started. And now they're stepping into the third generation with his son kind of taking over the trucking side.
Yeah. And a lot of people are so confused about weight limits and how all that works. But he talks about that in this podcast, how they were the first ones to do that. And if you're out west, you know that there's certain states that you can run heaviers and doubles and stuff like that. And John kind of goes through that. So, this is very educational just in that aspect. So cool. Well, John, we thank you for taking the time to do this. So with that said, here's my conversation with John Pocock of Pocock Trucking. Hey, John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jared. Good to be here.
Yeah. Well, this is our first time we've actually seen each other face to face. Hopefully one day we'll actually get to shake hands. I'm old school like that. But you've been a member on Bulk Loads. I looked it up since its inception, I think almost 13 years ago. So first, I say all the time, thank you so much for being a supporter and trusting us over the years using Bulk Loads.
You're welcome. It comes in handy. It's a good tool for us to use also.
Yeah. Well, appreciate it. Well, you're a serial entrepreneur. I love talking to people like you because I get a lot of information selfishly to learn about, but you've had several different companies. We're going to kind of dissect and talk all about that. But I think let's talk about the trucking piece first. Pocock Trucking, how did that get started?
Okay, well, we'll start from the beginning here. But my dad actually bought his first truck in 1979. And we farmed and ranched and actually milked a few cows when he was younger and a few things like that. But we basically grew up on a potato farm. We grew potatoes grain and alfalfa, and then always had a cattle. But in 1979, he bought the first truck and was one of the first guys in the Pacific Northwest to pull and run doubles. So of course, we run what you call the grain trains, the hopper doubles.
Yeah.
And us and a couple of neighbors bought some, and really was the first ones. We was kind of one of the first ones to run into like Washington and Oregon with doubles. Also
So-
back
So
in
tell me,
those.
how did that come to be? I've always wondered that. Like, how did you said the first ones did? Was there legislation that passed that now that you could run, or how did that become?
You know, Jared, I don't know the exact beginning of the history on doubles. I do know that it was only in the Pacific Northwest where you could run them.
Yep.
And then you had states like Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada that's been all along. You could run like higher weights, like 129,000. But the federal government in about the early 80s come in and put a limit on what you could run on interstate. So Idaho was like 105.5 state. You could only run 105,000. And we only got that changed about maybe 6-8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And we can run 129 on our interstates now. But that had to be changed federally through legislation in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
But how them be started in the beginning, I don't know. We'd have to do a little research.
Yeah, I was just curious on that. So your dad was one of the first ones.
Yep. And then what we did is my uncle, him and a couple of partners built a potato processing plant here in Ryrie, Idaho, and they use coal to power that plant. And so there's grain mills, flour mills in Ogden, Utah.
Yep.
And so we'd load wheat in Idaho, go to Ogden, Utah, and load at the flour mills, and then go into central Utah, load coal, and come back into the potato processing plant. And that was kind of our beginning. And then probably about the mid 80s, we started hauling fertilizer. So for like your Simplot, back then it was, I can't think of the name of, before Agrium owned the Conda plant, things like that. And that's kind of our bread and butter now. We haul a lot of phosphate out of Idaho into the Pacific Northwest, into Canada, and then we'll haul feeds and things like that back into Idaho. Idaho is the third largest milk producing state now. And so a lot of feed come back in here, all your DDGs and proteins and things like that come back in. So that's kind of what we do in the trucking business. But back to the beginning there. Yeah, he bought the first truck in 79. We bought a couple more in the early 80s. I started driving for my dad back in 85, 86, somewhere in there. And drove truck for him till 1991. And then in 91, I quit driving truck and started dispatching. At that time, I had an old cab over Kenworth and a belt trailer and a phone in a big bag phone.
Yep.
And we had three grain trains. And so I started dispatching out of that cab over truck, and that was my office. The doghouse on that cab over truck was my office. And started dispatching those trucks. And then we kind of grew from there. Early 90s, mid 90s, I had a couple of local farmers, and some of these guys had some extra help, and they started buying some trucks. And so we started running some owner operators. And then we started adding a few trucks. So by mid 90s, we was running, 7, 8, 10, 12 trucks ourselves. And then I had maybe a dozen owner operators running, and then just kind of grew from there. And then we, at one time when the economy was really booming, 05, 6, 7, 8 in there, we was dispatching close to 90 trucks. And it was myself and one other gal, just two of us. And
Wow.
And then I had one other lady work in the office. 4 of us was doing about 90 trucks. But there was a lot of growing pains in there. At some point you decide, can I afford to hire a mechanic? Because I was doing, I'd dispatch them during the week, drive part-time. Saturdays and Sundays, we'd change brake shoes and services. And then at nights I'd do billing. I was doing all the invoicing myself. and about working around the clock there to begin with. But anyway, them growing pains are kind of scary. Like I say, it's at some point you decide, can I afford to hire a secretary? Can I afford to hire a mechanic? And then about '08, we built a new truck shop. And so now we've got 4 or 5 guys working in the truck shop, got mechanics and things like that. But '08 and the economy crashed, we had a lot of guys leave, so a few owner operators leave, and they went to pull reefers and a few different things like that. And so we downsized a little bit. But currently right now, we've got about 35 company trucks. We've got about 70 sets of trailers, double trailer hopper trailers. And then we've got a bunch of owner operators that run for us. And so we're probably close to dispatching 70 trucks. And my son, Jevin, he started helping me here a couple years ago, and he's doing the majority of the dispatching now.
So you now have the third generation now working in the family business.
Yep. He'll be the 3rd generation.
You were mentioning early on too, you guys were farming as well. Did the trucking just grow did it outpace or outgrow the farming, or were you guys still farming as well?
We still farm as well. My dad, interesting enough, he bought the first truck and started the trucking business. But when I started dispatching and we started growing, he kind of distanced himself from the trucking a little bit. And I'm not sure exactly why, if he didn't like all the growth and the drivers and the headache that come with it, and of course I was young and I didn't care, I guess. But his favorite thing to do was he's always loved to feed cattle. And so we still have a small feedlot to this day. My youngest brother and one of my boys work at the feedlot, but feed the cattle. But we still farm, and we still farm the whole time. So currently we plant about 500 acres of potatoes. There's probably close to 500 acres of grain and 300 to 400 acres of hay. And then we do some custom haying too. So we'll put up probably 1,500 acres of alfalfa, 3 crops, and do a lot of that custom, or we'll buy it off the stump. But like I say, my younger brother and one of my sons takes care of all that part of the business. But yeah, we still to this day, we still farm. We've expanded. We have a cow calf operation. We do a little bit different out here in Idaho than most of our neighbors do. Most everybody out here calves in the dead of winter, January, February, when it's cold. And we've got a place that we can summer calves. So we start calving June 20th, and we calve them right out on the grass. And then we can market our calves in the spring, and it works good for us. But we'll calve out probably 450 pair this year.
I should have said this in the beginning of the podcast. I've been to Idaho once. It was up in the very northern part, Coeur d'Alene, and then we went down into, I think it was Moscow, where the university is, and beautiful, beautiful country. But you guys are a lot further south, right?
Yeah, so it's probably 8-hour car drive. Truck. If you got in a car truck, it'd probably be 8 hours to northern Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, up in there. So we're in the southeast corner, but the upper Snake River plain in here. So Sugar City, Idaho, we're only 80 miles from West Yellowstone, Montana, and only 80 miles from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Okay. So we're right here in the corner. We're in the middle of where they dump all the problem grizzly bears, and we got lots of wolves.
Oh my gosh. I was in Jackson Hole a couple of years ago. I didn't realize how close I actually was to your all's operation. So beautiful, beautiful country, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a view of the west side of the Grand Tetons. We can see them from the valley here.
Oh my gosh. God's country for sure.
We have long winters.
Yeah, that's true. You mentioned it's definitely a family business, but you talk about your dad, your son, but then, I mean, it sounds like you have brothers that are involved as well, maybe other nephews.
Yeah. So I'm the oldest. I was the oldest in our family. And then I got 2 brothers in the middle. Todd, my brother Todd, he's got a couple of them big custom applicators, the big air machines. And so that's what he does for a living. He custom applicates fertilizer. Jeff, he went to school down in Utah, and he just moved up here back to Idaho about 6-7 years ago. And he's been helping me at the ProPete fertilizer plant that we started here. And then my very youngest brother, Dustin, he's the one that manages the farm now and takes care of it and makes all those decisions. So he pretty well does takes care of the farming side. Right now I took over the trucking business, and then started a couple of these other little side businesses.
Well, let's jump over to that, and we might dance around with some of this, but I have watched you grow the ProPete business over the last several years. Some of your posts on LinkedIn have reached out to you, but first off, congrats, by the way. I mean, especially when you're involved in so many different businesses. But tell us a little bit about the ProPete business. What is it, by the way, and then how did it come to be?
So, being in the bulk commodity business, freight business, we deal with lots of fertilizer companies. And we had a customer down in Utah, and this company's been in business for a long time. I hauled fertilizer into them myself in the late 80s. We used to haul ammonium nitrate into them, and they used to process onions down there. But anyway, I know those guys really well, and we had bought some pasture one spring, and where we was going to run some cows, and I just got to talking to those guys about grass and fertilizer and what they recommend to get good growth and anything. Anyway, one conversation led to another, and this guy's name's Rob, and worked for him, and he says, I've been seeing some guys at these golf industry shows that are making a carbon-based fertilizer. He says, you ought to look into that. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, what do I need to look into that for? And anyway, he told them about myself, and they showed up that fall. And these guys are from this technology was developed in South Africa. And a guy named Ockert Fiore is his name. And he still runs a company down there called Namturf. And they do a lot in the golf industry. But this guy eats, drinks, and sleeps plant science. And he's as down to earth as they come. He can explain that to you. The whole plant cycle, how it intakes nutrients, the whole works. And he developed this carbon fertilizer and realized the importance of carbon. So our soils are really short in carbon. We farmed the carbon out of it. And it's an important part of the way the plant intakes nutrients. And he had tried everything, compost and all kinds of things with carbon in it, and come up with the idea of peat moss. So he started making this carbon fertilizer in South Africa, and he's importing his peat moss from Ireland down there to get it down there. And the reason he started using peat moss is because it's consistent. Sphagnum peat's about 50 to 60% carbon, and it's consistent all the time. There's nothing wrong with compost, but if you're worked with compost some, it can burn itself out. You have to stir it just right, mix it just right. And you really never know. Has it got 2% nitrogen? Has it got 6% nitrogen? It's really inconsistent. Not that it's bad. Compost is good for your soil, but it's just inconsistent if you're trying to make a fertilizer. And you have to come up with a guaranteed analysis all the time. So that's what he come up with. So anyway, next thing you know, I'm on a plane to Johannesburg, and I go down and visit Ockert. And we go into Bethlehem, South Africa, and he's got a little small plant there. And they could make maybe 2 to 3 tons a day is all they could make, almost all, physical labor at this plant. And I says, well, I got to have proof, that this works. So I imported a container, 2 container loads. We brought it through the port of Houston. I bought it from him. We brought it up here. We tried on some ag land. We put a bunch in some bags and shipped it into the Gulf industry, all over the United States, everywhere from California to Florida, and said, okay, try this. And at the time, his fertilizer was called Carbon Complex. And that's what, same thing as ProPete, but that's what he called it in South Africa. And anyway, went through the summer, and the trials looked good. It did work well. And I had a gentleman out of Houston, Texas, His name's Pat Neindorf, works for Winfield United, which just got bought out by Heritage Landscape.
Yep.
And he calls and he says, "Hey, I got to have some of this. This stuff works." And he says, "It works good." And I said, "Well, we're in the process of, if you guys think you'll use this and buy it, we'll build a plant." So we started building a plant that fall, and then it took about a year to get the plant up and running. And then after we got it up and running, we had so many challenges. I don't know if you've ever tried to move peat moss through equipment, but it bridges, it doesn't flow. We tore out equipment, put in new equipment, and we really couldn't ask anybody for advice because nobody's ever granulated this type of product before. So we really had a lot of trial and error to get this plant up and running. But anyway, it's running now. And what ProPete so we renamed it and branded it. I bought the rights to it for North America. So I have ProPete for Mexico, US, and Canada. However, they give me their blessing to sell it. Most of it runs through them, but we're selling this worldwide. I've actually got a shipment in the plant right now to go to Australia.
Oh my gosh.
That'll be the third container there. And Ockert actually buys his product from me now for South Africa for his golf courses. We make such a nice, good quality product here. I load a container and ship it back to South Africa, and he sells ProPete there. But we've sold into South Africa, Australia, South Korea, golf industry, South Korea, Sweden, Canada, Mexico, and we even sent a few pallets into Mongolia a couple of years ago.
Wow. So who is the ideal client? I mean, there's different ranges of fertilizer for different plants and grain and you name it. Who is the ideal customer of ProPete?
So turf and ornamental.
Okay.
It works excellent on ag. We've tried it on everything, but it's expensive. And I'll get to that in a minute because of our process. It's kind of it's a high-end fertilizer. But turf and ornamental. So we make a fairway grade, a greens grade for the golf industry, and then go into landscapers, home, lawn care. Currently, we sell through Home Depot online only. We'll ship 25-pound bags. You just it's not in the stores yet. I'm working on that. We're working with them. Hopefully, spring of 2024, we have it in Home Depot.
Nice.
But, right now, you can buy it online. We box it up here at the plant. UPS takes it out every day and goes to it. But back to what ProPete is and what makes it work. So what we do is we take regular NPK. So it's not bugs in a jug. We use ammonium sulfate for a nitrogen source, MAP, phosphate for a phosphate or phosphorus source, and then potash, potassium.
Mm-hmm.
And we bring it in and we run it through a hammer mill and grind it into a powder. And then we take that sphagnum peat moss and grind it and run it into a powder. And then we reblend it. So we're reblending your NPK, your peat moss. We add 5 micronutrients and a couple other ingredients to help the pH and a few things. And then we run it through across a pan granulator. So we've got a pan granulator here in the plant, and we regranulate it so it makes an homogeneous granule. So when you use ProPete, your NPK and your peat is in every single granule. It's not like buying a blended one at the local Ace Hardware, if that makes sense, where you've got a white kernel, a green kernel, and a red kernel, granule, I should say, your nitrogen, phosphate, and your potash. It's in every single granule. And then the science behind ProPete is what happens is your NPK binds to the carbon in the peat. So it makes for a natural release. So when you apply the fertilizer, that carbon in the peat holds that NPK until the plant needs it. And the plant can literally take it at will. It works like a slow release, but it can also be a fast release. The plant can literally take them nutrients as it needs them. It's kind of works like your kitchen pantry when you go to make dinner. You just pull the ingredients you need. That's the same way. That's how ProPete works.
Wow. I've seen some of the booths. You've been in different trade shows. This being a fellow, entrepreneur, business owner, nothing ever sells itself. How have you been able to expand ProPete and get the knowledge out there to the benefits of this product versus anything else out in the market?
Well, it's been a tough deal. We started this from the ground up. I mean, nobody's ever even heard of carbon. Still to this day, we're still the only plant in the world that mixes peat moss with NPK. But it's really been it's education. And that's the reason I hit these trade shows, is try to educate people. And we're still actively looking for distributors. We're looking for distributors all over the United States. We've got a few, and we're picking up more and more all the time. But it's been tough. We did pretty good the first 3 years. We was basically doubling sales every year. The golf industry show moves around the United States. 3 years ago, it was in Orlando. I had a couple of good distributor lined up in Florida. We were selling a little product down there. I flew home and the pandemic hit. Of course, shuts all the golf courses down.
Yep.
And then during the pandemic, our freight rates just went skyrocketed. It's double or triple to go to Florida what it was before. And so we really lost a year and a half in this deal, and we kind of had to start over. But we're starting over now. We're getting our momentum back. And this same guy, Rob, that introduced me to these guys, I just hired him May 1st. And he's actually traveling to California this week to meet with some new distributors down there. And we're going to get this deal off the ground and up and running.
That's awesome. John, I want to talk maybe just bigger, broad business for our listeners out there. We have, all different shapes and sizes of business owners, single owner operators, guys with 5 trucks, 10 trucks. We even have a lot of commodity traders on here. You have a lot going on. From what you've told me, I mean, between the trucking operation, so the farming, this pro-Pete, how do you organize your time appropriately to focus on what needs to be done?
Well, I used to laugh at those. I used to go to meetings. You'd go to a few meetings and there'd be always this guy in the meeting that says, I got to look at my calendar. I used to always laugh at that guy, right? Because I was thinking, yeah, whatever. Well, now I'm one of those guys. I have to have an Outlook calendar and schedule.
I do too.
Schedule meetings but I don't. The way I've looked at things, I don't worry too much about. You start looking ahead into the future. I have a lot of things going on every day, but I just put my head down, go to work every day, do what I can. If you start looking too far ahead and start worrying about what you got to do, you'll drive yourself crazy. You'll end up in the loony bin. Just the anxiety from it. And so I decided a long time, even back when I was dispatching trucks, if I had a truck stuck somewhere and didn't have a load for him the next morning, I used to lose sleep over it. And I finally just told myself, you know what, it's still going to be there in the morning. I can't do anything about it. I'll try again in the morning. And you basically got to make that decision and just say, look, there's only so much I can do, and that's the way it is. But that's part of it. And then the other thing is having good help. I've got an excellent man at my truck shop that manages the trucks schedules the services, and we do outside repairs too. We do a lot of outside work, and here a few years ago, I started a little truck sales company too. We buy and sell some trucks.
Oh, wow.
The pandemic started that. When the economy crashed, they was hauling all these old cement mixer trucks to the auctions, and we was picking those things up next to nothing. And I got looking at them one day when I was at the auction, and the wheelbase was just right. So we bring them home, tear the cement mixers off, and we put potato beds on them and sell them to the farmers here in the valley for potato trucks. And they got low speed transmissions in them, and they're tough. And I'll bet we've brought in, fixed up 300 or 400 of them old cement trucks now.
It's amazing, like where you see an opportunity when it's there, which is amazing. It's like some people always wonder, like, how did you get started at that? Where you just saw the opportunity, that you saw these trucks at the auction and there was a way to bring them in and resell them. Before the podcast, John, we were talking before we started the recording about, you were asking a lot about bulk loads. Again, we hadn't really talked that much, even though you've been with us, and I've known who you are and you knew us. We've grown really in the short. I mean, we've been around now 13 years, but some of these other businesses, we're over 50 employees. You guys are there's a lot of employees between the truck drivers, dispatchers, farm workers, and all that. How do you keep a pulse on everything that's going on? When you have that many different operations, that many different segments, you got the drivers, you got the farming, you got the peat moss. How do you keep a pulse on how everything's doing?
So, and I was doing this before I read a book, but I read a book one time about J.W. Marriott, and
Yeah.
when he used to go through and he had a saying called "management by walking around." So he used to visit his little hot shops back then, and that's what I try to do. I don't get it done every day, but I try to get in my pickup and I try to drive to the truck shop, and I'll stop and visit with the guys. And it's interesting, even as capable, and I have really good employees, but it's interesting. They'll run an idea past you. Oh, we can't fix this. Well, you always learn something new every day, but as long as I've been around trucks, there's some experience there where you say, oh, just do this or just do that. And they say, oh, okay. So then I'll swing around to the farm, or I'll swing around to the feedlot, or then I'll go to the fertilizer plant, and I come into the office. And I think that's a lot of it is be open enough to listen to your employees, and if they have ideas, and then give them experience and feedback the way it is. But the true way to make businesses work is to have good employees and ones that'll stick around. And we've always tried to pay our employees a good wage. One thing that's always drove me crazy is turnover. And
Yep.
to me, it's cheaper to pay a little extra wages
Yep.
than have turnover and retraining people all the time. So we try to take care of our employees. We've had drivers with us for, over 20. I got lots of drivers been over with us for over 20 years. Over the last, I'm also the chairman of the Idaho Trucking Advisory Committee, and it's called the TAC. And I've been part of that for about 12 or 13 years too. And we go to Boise quarterly for Trucking Advisory Committee meetings. We meet with Idaho Transportation Department people and talk about issues there. But you'd be in meetings and with other carriers, and they're talking about, oh, I can't find any drivers and all that. And I've always been kind of quiet because I never had a big problem with drivers. In fact, I do things kind of opposite. Companies will buy trucks and then try to find drivers. If I have a good guy come around wanting a job, I'll say, hey, I got a spare truck out here. Jump in that. We'll order you a new one. And that's kind of how we've grown. If I know a guy and he's a good guy, comes around, I'll just say, yeah, I got a spare truck out here. Jump in that thing. If you like your job, works out here in a couple of months, we'll just order you a new truck.
I want to actually kind of go and talk a little bit about that before we run out of time. Just a few more kind of questions, John. We're here in the Midwest, so I've gotten to know a lot about trucking here in the Midwest, especially with weight limits and commodities. Idaho, you guys kind of run in that little pocket out there. Is it just as competitive out there? And I'll say this year has been a little more challenging. We've seen a little bit of a pullback in the market. Even the general freight market, tonnages went down. So that's created more competition in the market. So, freight rates, there's been more pressure on that. With what you guys are doing out there, and again, running those doubles and all that, is it just as competitive, do you feel like?
It has been over the years. And of course, we've been in the trucking business for over 40 years. And you'll always have some new guy pop up that buys a couple, 3 trucks, and then they come in and they cut freight rates. And I've been through all of that. However, when back in the 80s, I could buy a new truck for $85,000, right? Now they're over 200, 215. And new set of Western trailers, 137,000. So, you're looking at $350,000 to put one truck and set of trailers on the road. So now you're not seeing as many of them little guys just pop up out of the blue and get
it's a lot of overhead.
They come in for 2 years, 3 or 4 years, and then they're gone. So the expense of equipment, we don't like that, but it's kind of helped a little bit for some of these guys that just come in and don't know what they're doing. So that's part of it too. But yeah, it's competitive. One thing we've done out here in the West is we try to get along with everybody. I started doing this here 20 years ago, and we're competitors, but if we need some help, I'm not scared to reach out to a guy down the road. I know a couple of drivers or a couple other hopper companies around here all run 20, 30 trucks. I'll reach out to them and say, hey, I got a big job here. We need some help. And we started doing that about 20 years ago. And it's worked out well. We just try to get along with everybody, and then they can help us or we help them. And that's kind of what we've done.
There's almost a mutual respect for each other that maybe you don't get in other parts of the country, I would say.
Yeah, and because the way I've always looked at it, there's plenty of work out there for all of us. We always have our slow times. Like, for example, we just got out of it. June is just terrible for hoppers. I mean, we always struggle in June. The 11 months, we're pretty darn busy all the time. And that's just the way it is. We try to, encourage the drivers, hey, will you take your vacation or take some vacation in the month of June while we struggle here a little bit? But that's the way we've done it.
Yeah. John, what does the future look like for your umbrella of companies or your family's umbrella of companies?
Well, with all the regulations, I actually feel a little bit sorry for the next generation coming up, because, it's not as fun as it used to be. And you hear people say that all the time, and it's sad to say that. When I was driving truck, it used to be fun. I mean,
you enjoyed it.
Yeah. I mean, in Idaho, you could get what we call a chauffeur's license. I got a chauffeur's license at 16. And I was trucking at 16, intrastate in the state of Idaho. I was sneaking out of here a little bit at 18, 19, running some interstate. In fact, I got caught in Oregon on my 21st birthday. But I'd run 1 million miles by the time I was 25 years old. And so I'd started pretty young. And I think that also helps with employees and drivers. You've been there, done that. They know that you're not just some guy that hasn't done anything. But when it comes to the future, it's tough. I look at the age of our drivers, and I wonder if we're even going to be in business in another 10 years. I got a slew of guys that'll retire in the next 10 years, and I don't know what we're going to do to replace them. Luckily, the last few months, I've started to have a few younger guys come around. So it gives you a little bit of hope. But, the biggest thing is with these government regulations and just the way the economy goes up and down, some of the decisions that our government makes, you just shake your head a little bit and wonder what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I feel the same way. I also look at like where there's problems, there's solutions, or there's opportunities, I guess. And I've tried to keep a positive mindset. Not saying, but it is tougher. I would totally agree with you that it's been. I hear that all the time talking to different generations that say, "Man, it used to be fun. Trucking used to be fun. Now it's not as much." But yeah, with the regulations that are going on. Man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation. We used to do kind of company highlights. We kind of drifted away from those, and we were kind of bringing them back in. So, John, thanks for just taking the time, man. We love what you're doing out there. I love businesses like yours where you had the farming operation, you got the trucking, but then some of these other operations. I mean, a lot of it all kind of centers around agriculture, which we're passionate about here at bulkLoads. Thanks again for coming on. I think I'm gonna find a way or figure out a way to come visit you out there, man. That sounds like beautiful country. I'm sure there's
Yeah,
some good fishing and hunting.
yeah, do come out and visit us. Jared, you just mentioned agriculture, and I'll mention one more. I know you need to wrap up here. I'll mention
you're
one
good.
more thing, but our ProPete plant has given us the capability of doing a little research and development, and we've come up with a new way to make phosphate. And if you want to look it up when you get a minute, our product is called Fossil. It's PHOSUL. And we've got a website, fossil.com. And it's a natural process to make phosphate become available to the plant. And I had a couple of chemists help me do this. I didn't do this on my own. One worked for Simplot for 25 years, and he's retired and consulting now. And another guy worked for a company that traveled the fertilizer plants all over the world. He's retired, lives up in Montana, and he's a partner in it and helped us develop it. So I don't think I'm the smart guy that developed this. We just had the means to help them develop it. But anyway, we're producing this product, this fossil product at our plant now, and we're looking to expand it and looking for phosphate deposits to keep this thing going. And so that's kind of one of the next project I'm working on right now.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll be excited to kind of see how that comes along. Like I said, I love seeing your posts, especially through LinkedIn, as you guys have developed this. So congratulations with that. John, thanks again for coming on.
Okay. Thank you, Jared.
I've been in agriculture now almost 25 years. Well, I mean, I was born in ag, but out here, fertilizer fascinates me. I still don't fully grasp it, but to use peat moss and how the micronutrients bind to it. Yeah. I liked his analogy on
the kitchen.
Yeah, well, on a pantry, and how you get food as you are hungry. Yeah. And how this is the same way with plants. How the plant gets the micronutrients as they need it versus where they're just absorbed and leached, I guess, into the soil. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole science behind it is crazy. And I'm sure you can get real technical, but John did a good job explaining just the overview of it and why it's not heavily used. It can be used in agriculture, but it's very expensive premium fertilizer. So a lot of guys you don't see using it. It's more for like golf courses and stuff like that. But yeah, I didn't even know there was a thing before.
And he found a guy in South Africa that was doing this, and then now John's making it in Idaho and then shipping it
all over the world
to Australia. Yeah. Like this world is super small when it comes to thinking about that. Yeah. So again, John, thank you for being on the podcast. We appreciate you. I hope one day I get to meet you. I hope one day I can travel out there to meet them and combine that with some sightseeing, fishing, maybe some elk hunting and so forth. But before we head out, a couple quick announcements. We're going to have our first ever webinar to talk about bulk TMS. If you've never been on, I haven't been on a whole lot of webinars, but the ones I have been on, they're super beneficial for a couple reasons. But we're going to host our first ever webinar to talk about bulk TMS. And the cool thing, if you think about this, sometimes it's hard to get to be on a one-on-one demo. There's time and obligations. You got to set time. This webinar, you can consume it as you want, right? I mean, there's going to be the live webinar, but then you can go back and watch it. And it's going to cover a lot of the questions that most people ask about bulk TMS and what it encompasses and everything it can do.
Yeah, and to get the recorded version, you will have to sign up for the webinar. You can do that by going to bulktms.com. There's a webinar tab. You just click that. You just sign up with your name and email and stuff. You'll get access to it. I'll tell you, my favorite thing about webinars is that you can join them and leave as you please. Yeah. So this is not going to be a super long one. But if you've ever wondered what the heck is bulkLoads Plus or bulk TMS, you're wondering, is it for my company? Is it for me? You can join. If you get halfway through it, you realize it doesn't fit your operation, you can just leave. That's the great thing about it. We do have limited space with this webinar, so you do want to hurry. The date of it is August 23rd. So that's our kickoff date for it. So you can go to bulktms.com, click webinar, sign up for it, and you'll be reminded.
A little bit less than a month away. And if you are not available on that day or miss it, still reach out and we can set up one-on-one demos.
Yep.
But this is just an easy one that you can be in there with a group online and learn about that. We had a couple stop by last night,
Yep.
Coach Whip Trucking, and I just blatantly asked them, "Hey, how's the TMS working?" She said, "It's been a game changer."
Yeah.
Like she said that like it has reduced her workload. I forget how much, but like tremendously on how they do business now. So
Yep.
we're not trying to feed you full of bull. This system works. And if you are curious about it or just want to know more, we're not going to shove it down your throat and try to sell it to you. We want to show you the benefits and give you the peace in business that this service or product is giving.
Exactly. Another benefit of a webinar too is that you can ask questions during it. With there being quite a bit of people, some people might have the same questions. So somebody might ask a question that you're thinking, and we'll be able to answer it on there. But speaking of signing up, we have the conference coming up next year, April. It's going to be at the end of April, April 24th through the 26th. We've had a lot of people ask about how they can get tickets. We don't have tickets readily available right now, but they will be on sale soon. If you go to bulkfreightconference.com, you can enter your email and we'll notify you whenever those go on sale.
We're giving away a semi-truck, right?
That'd be the dream.
One day.
Yeah.
But we're going to have some really cool prizes. I will promise you that.
Yeah. I mean, technically, we'll probably give away a semi-truck.
Yeah. Just not a life-size one.
Maybe not a life-size
one.
one.
But no, we will have a lot of cool other gifts. So yeah, make sure and put that on your calendar. 2024. It's going to be here before you know it.
Yep.
I know my calendar fills up.
We're
Most of
already
you all.
planning.
Yeah, it gets busy. So make sure and save the date. Go ahead and register or save the date on bulkfreightconference.com.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else before we head out of here?
I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, man, we hope you are enjoying your summer. I'm busy, but good busy. Again, we always say this at the very end. If you have any prayers or prayer requests, it doesn't have to be for you. I mean, we want to hear from you. It's all anonymous. If you know of other people, last week I got several emails from people that sent prayer requests for other people that they knew in the industry, and we prayed over those people.
Yep.
So if you have prayer requests for others out there, simply send us an email. Again, we won't share it with anybody else. We want to pray for those that are out there. All you have to do is go to prayer@bulkloads.com, or you can send us a message however you want to send it to us.
Yep,
So.
exactly.
Awesome. Well, as always, thank you for listening to the Bulk Loads podcast. If you know of others that can benefit from this or would like to know more about it, please share it through your social media. We would greatly appreciate that and get this in the hands of those people so they can benefit. So thank you very much. God bless.